Solider Anby versus Evelyn, guys. Which one should you be pulling? Which one is better? Now, a slight disclaimer before we hop into this video. Take what I say with a grain of salt. We don't know finally what Anby will do. This is honestly just assumptions on what she'll do, surely, right? But just take what I say with a grain of salt. I will be providing you what I believe to be pretty good information. So make sure you watch till the end of the video so I can tell you who's better, either Anby or Evelyn. But do take what I say with a grain of salt because things can change, especially on the Anby end. And one more thing, guys, is another brief little disclaimer here. I probably say a lot of additional damage, and I probably say a lot of, oh, she'll probably help you off field and stuff like that. Can't get into specifics here, but hey, knowers know. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section down below. And if you think something's a little bit misleading and not what you think, then I'll try to clarify in the comment section down below. But if I say off-field damage, just know that off-field damage maybe doesn't pertain to her being off-field. Maybe it pertains to someone else being off-field. I don't know. But yeah, just a heads up, guys. So the 4 things I want to touch on today, guys, is damage, free-to-play casual value, future-proof ability, and you should go ahead and hit that subscribe button now. That's not really the 4th thing. I kind of lied to you on the 4th thing there. Just subscribe to the channel, or please, I beg of you. Obviously, for damage, there are 2 things here that can be said. There are 2 things here that are pretty prevalent. So starting off first, guys, fire, right? We already know she's fire. We already know that she is electric. So this is going to be a very crucial thing here, right? Because how enemies are divided up into the game, not even necessarily the DPS that we currently have in the game, which we can look at right now to see. Okay, sorry, this was from last video here of how do I get off of this? What the fuck? Because what we currently have right now in terms of DPS for electricity is going to be Yanagi. We also have Haramasa, we have Anton, and we have Grace. So really nothing too good. Now, I will say Haramasa I do think is better than the rating they give him. You just have to be very skilled and play him correctly. So I do think adding in another electric type DPS into the game is very good. But the same thing can be said with fire as well. All we really have here is Bernice. Well, I guess we have 2 Soldier 11 here. So I do believe there's a lot more varied options for the fire typing here. Also on top of that, guys, I want to touch on another thing here, which is actually enemies, which we can kind of go over. We went over my last video if you watched that. Guys, fire and physical play really hand in hand with each other. If we take a look at all the enemies in the game right now, we take a look at electric, right? Electric, there's no subtyping there. I think we have 1 or 2 subtyping here. Yes, electric and ether for this one boss, and then we have electric and ether for these little shitters as well. Overall, guys, electric is usually standalone. But also with that, guys, this means that Evelyn can be played with physical characters, or really, you could replace just about every single scenario that Evelyn currently works in with a physical character and still get the job done. So that being said, guys, we can go ahead and calculate this up to a little small amount here. So for fire type versus fire in physical, that's 13 fire physical versus 7 just fire. In terms of DPS, we have 5 DPS that are fire physical that can work for these enemies. Whereas for this, when Evelyn gets released, this also includes Evelyn as well, we will have 3 DPS here. So we have about maybe 40-ish% of like DPS to enemy ratio here. So there is a lot of different options you can have here. Whereas for electric, the story is a lot different, right? Because with the amount of DPS we have in the game right now, which with the addition of Anby will be 3, which equals the same amount of DPS we would be having in the game that fire has, there are a lot less enemies in the game. But that's not to say that it probably won't add more enemies when she comes out, because there's only 2 that are dual typing and 4, and these are normally the fodder mobs that you really don't give a shit about. In terms of like actual boss monsters, you're talking about 4 enemy tiers, right? So there's a lot bigger emphasis on like how many of these characters we have, electric type characters we have, versus the amount of fire type characters we have in the game right now. So I do think there's a bit more of a need for a fire DPS unit account versus an electric DPS unit account at this time. So now we need to go into the free stats that she's going to be giving. Guys, she's going to be giving 25% crit rate here. So I mean that's really it, right? But also what I want to mention here as well, in terms of not even just free stats, but how the additional ability procs, you proc this off with having any stunner on the team or having any support character on the team. So this opens up a wide variety of options for teams you can run with her versus Anby over here. So let's go ahead and talk about what Anby needs to have. So one of 2 things she has to have here, right? Either a 1-to-1 crit ratio, right? That means she has the same amount of crit rate that she would offer in her kit. My bad, she offers more than this, just plus 19.4 as well, so a little bit more crit rate than that. But overall, my point still stands here. At least a 1-to-1 crit ratio here, or if we're talking in terms of crit damage, it would need to be at least a 1-to-2 crit ratio, meaning Anby would need at least 88% in additional crit rate value than what she's able to provide, or she would need to have higher multis or multipliers for her damage scenarios, or number 3, her attacks are more frequent and deal more damage as well. She needs to be able to keep up with the amount of damage per se that she's able to have, because she gives a lot of free stats and she has a pretty good amount of damage output with the free stats that she's able to provide. But I do believe if she has any of these things right here, that she will be on par and or better than that. Now, I'm not going to really go into what the additional ability might do, because I think that's kind of unfair to go into right now, because I mean, you could play off the team, which would make her more viable for future proofing, or you could play more into herself, which would make her technically, I guess, stronger in the short term, right? So this is very strong. This means you can run her with just about every single team in the game. I think what could possibly happen with Anby here, guys, is I think she plays off a stunner, but I do think we are getting an electric stunner added to the game, so I think stunner is probably an obvious here that she's going to be able to play with. But on top of this, guys, with us getting a whole new, like, type in the game, and a whole new, I guess, faction in the game, right? So I think it's going to be stunner plus faction, which is overall a net worse than just playing with a stunner slash support. Having stunner is really nice because you can play with every single stunner in the game, but having support is just a lot better, because what if you had a team where you didn't run stunner per se, right? Maybe you run a dual DPS team, maybe you have a double support team, right? A lot of these scenarios you can play with her, right? Whereas with her, you have to run a stunner or someone in the faction at all times. But I do feel like overall, in the terms of free stats departments and how she kind of works with other teammates, the free stuff that she gets is a little bit better for Evelyn here than what she'll be able to give in terms of what they have. Now, the final thing here is kind of hard to explain, right? I'm talking skill ceiling to damage ratio, and the best way that I can describe this, I probably won't even write anything on that like section there at all, is if we go take a look at the current agents we have in the game right now. Let's go to the tier list, because it's a little bit easier, right? Haramasa, expert role, expert. You see that expert role here? There's a reason he's ranked in tier 1.5, because you need to play him well to get a lot of damage out. If you're not playing him well to get that damage out, his damage shits the fucking bed, right? So that's what I mean by skill ratio to damage output, right? Haramasa is the perfect example here, guys. If you can't play with him well, his damage shits the bed. Versus if you just Ooga Booga Brain here, then you kind of get the job done with her, right? Like, you just spam, spam, spam. Oh, chain attack, boom! Spam, 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 chain attack, boom, bam! And that's just the kind of only thing you do there, right? Versus Anby, where I think for Anby, this skill ceiling is going to be higher. I do feel like the damage ratio is a little bit less in terms of the skill ceiling you need to play the character, versus like how much skill you need to play this character right here, and the damage they get out with that skill ceiling. I do feel as though the overall damage for her will be up. I just think that skill ceiling is going to be a little bit higher, so that means she's a little bit harder to play, and you get less of a damage in return for that skill ceiling. And the final thing that I want to note here, guys, is what type of damage are these characters doing? Like on-field, off-field damage? Like, what is the case with these characters, right? They're both on-field characters. I mean, like, they're both going to be doing on-field damage. They are main DPSs for your team. They're both going to be on the field doing damage. It really just depends on what character can do more damage, and what character can necessarily bring more damage out of your team, what character can play off the team better, and so on and so forth. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move over to our free-to-play casual value, because this is where a lot of importance lies when you're getting characters, guys. Now, the first thing we're going to get over is team options. What are the best in-slot teams you can run? What falls within the criteria of our stunner support here, stunner faction here? So let's go ahead and hop into that now. Now, she has less options. I think that's pretty safe to say that Anby has a little bit less options. That being said, with someone like Anby, you always have to have a breaker on the team. So one of this, one of this, one of this here, one of this here, this here, this here. Like, you get the point, right? You always need someone like this on the team to make her pop off and work. But genuinely outside of that, everyone else here can work. We're talking about synergizing here, right? I do believe that Anby has the little bit of an upper edge here. Now, why do I think that, right? Guys, we're getting through. What the fuck? I can't draw an arrow to save my fucking life. What the fuck, bro? Hello? Arrow up, bro. What the fuck? I do think she has the upper hand here just because of the fact that we are getting two new characters. We're getting Put Ultra here, or however you say her fucking name, and we're also getting Trigger here as well. And what I think will happen with these two characters here is I think they're going to be playing off of the same assumption and or the same type of style that she's been playing off of, right? So maybe she like does something like dealing additional damage to the enemy, right? And maybe she plays off of it and she helps the team play off of it, right? So if both of the new characters that are getting added to the game on the patch she's getting added to the game, the new 4-star and the other new 5-star breaker, which is part of her same faction, plays off of this additional damage, then obviously you already have two pretty big in slots here. I do think that does give her overall future proof ability as well, which I think we mentioned in that last part here, because of the fact if you have something on the team that's not so selfish, right? I'm not going to sit here and say that Anby is not selfish with the stat that she gives to herself and the damage that she provides to herself. I'm just saying that Evelyn's damage is all for herself. herself, whereas Anby's buffs and the core abilities and stuff like that help out the rest of the team as well. That's the best assumption I can make there, okay? I do believe that Anby does have the better team scenario here. Now, in terms of builds, what can we assume here for in terms of builds? Obviously, her build is easy. We talked about that over in this last video. We're just going to briefly go over this, right, guys? Build's very easy, guys. You get 25 plus 19% free crit rate for Evelyn here, so a lot of free crit rate. The maximum crit rate you want to be hitting with her is 75. The minimum is 52% to make sure you're getting over the 80% margin to actually get her additional ability off. Like I said, the maximum crit margin, her actual 100% is 75%, and then also the base you need to hit is a lot lower than like 80%, right? So very, very easy to build in terms of that build here. Now, do I think that the build for Anby here is going to be as easy? No, I don't think so. I think that the obvious winner here is going to be here. This is much easier to build than what Anby's going to be here. The problem that I run into with her, right, is that there's no, like, defined set for her, right? Whereas I think for Anby, probably gonna have a defined set. So, I mean, having a defined set probably ends up giving you better stats in the in-game than what this does provide. So I think overall damage output here will be higher on her, like I said before. So I think the build for her will net her more damage than what the build for her allows her to do. But the build will be harder to get. So for free-to-play casual players, obviously the better build would be her, because her build's easier to get. You have to spend less time getting it. Whereas the build probably takes longer with her. Probably have to farm out a new set to have her best in slot. And then on top of that, you're farming for a lot more stats as well. Now, ease of play. Yo, I'm not gonna lie, she might just be the easier Haramasa. So I feel like that she is going to be playing similarly to Haramasa. Not exactly the same. I don't think you need to use her in break windows. I think she's going to be used pretty similar to how like she would play, like a lot of on-field time, like we mentioned before. So she'll be on the field a lot. But I think like dash attacks, additional attacks, stuff like that, she will be the bitch for that. Okay, so I feel like her ease of play is a little bit higher, right? That means you can't really just oonga boonga bring it as much as you can with her. Literally with her, you can just click a couple times and hold down and you're good to go. Whereas her, you kind of need to time things up more. I just feel like it's going to be easier to play her over Anby. So, I mean, like, if you're free to play casual, I feel like the overall free to play and casualness of this, guys, is going to be kind of leaning towards Evelyn here, though I do believe in the long term, in the future proof ability of Anby is higher than that of Evelyn, just because maybe her buffs help the rest of the team out, that help her provide damage out for herself. So since she's able to help the team out, that means any other good supports that maybe do additional damage on the road, she's also able to help them out as well. So she's more of a team player than I would say Evelyn is. So with that being said, we can now move on to our future proof ability category here, and that's going to be future meta right now. With Evelyn here, right? Her whole thing is chain attack, right? So that's something that's kind of already been established in the game, getting additional chain attacks. And honestly, she's helped out characters like Coletta here, right? Coletta gets a bit of a power bump here because she helps you get additional damage for those chain attacks. But like we said, Anby here, we mentioned this down here, she's getting 2 whole new characters here. Pearlcha is probably going to be on the banner with her. That means that she's already going to be kind of working with her, and we already know that this is probably going to introduce a new meta, maybe additional attack meta, I don't know. What do I think they're going to lean more into? I feel like chain attack is a lot more of a broad meta. I feel like in terms of increases, the chain attack meta is a little bit more broad than the additional attack meta, because characters would have to have an ability that says additional attack, versus every single character in the game has a chain attack, whereas it's more prevalent with her just in her kit being able to activate it more often. So I do feel like overall it would be easier for her to get indirect buffs for chain attacks than it would be for her to get this. I think you would need specific characters to buff additional attacks to make her better in this field here. Now, I think that dash attacks could play a role here as well. So, I mean, like, dash attacks, cool, right? I mean, like, Haramasa plays off this, so could work possibly there too. So I feel like it's going to be a lot easier to get indirect buffs for her versus her. With that being said, the buffs that she's able to provide is very to herself, right? Like, she is going to be helping herself out more. She's helping herself eat more at the table, while her buffs are obviously to herself, right? I feel like that's like, if we were to put a pie chart here, that's like the majority of the pie here, which is to help self. But there's obviously another section of the pie here, and that is going to be for like the rest of the team, right? Whereas the whole pie here is kind of self-inserted damage. You at least get some of the pie here to help out the rest of the team, and I always think having just a little bit of that pie for the rest of the team can help in the long run of things, just because she's able to buff her allies up more. It gives the team more longevity, so if another character comes out, she's able to buff them up even more, which ultimately brings the team damage up. But if we're talking about Anby versus Evelyn, I honestly still think Anby's better. I think the only way that Anby really falters is in terms of the amount of enemies we have in the game right now, as we mentioned before, guys. We have 3 DPS in the game right now, including her. That'll be good there. We don't have that many enemies in the game right now compared to Fire Physical, which we have a lot more enemies added into the game already. I feel like that's really the only win that Evelyn gets here, in my opinion. I think she is a little bit more free-to-play friendly on the build aspect. Don't get me wrong. But my perspective on this is, guys, if a character is able to do more damage, they're going to last you for longer, and they make the team better, I think that's the obvious better option, right? Like, I'm sure that Evelyn's going to put out some massive damage. She's going to be easy as fuck to build to get this damage. But I can't sit here and tell you that she's going to fall off later than Anby. I think Anby's here to stay a little bit longer than her. I don't know how much longer. I do believe you'll probably get a little bit more mileage out of your Anby than you will of her. Anyways, guys, that's going to do it for today's video. If you enjoyed, please drop a like on the video. I'd much appreciate that. Anyways, that's going to do it, guys. See you later. Bye-bye.